My name is Noah Sutterish, and I'm the building steward here at historic St. John's Episcopal Church. St. John's has always been a place of worship and justice. The church was built in 1936 and is the oldest consecrated church in Cuyahoga County. Its congregation then helped serve to make this place one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad, where people hoping for freedom hid in the bell tower right behind you. In the latter half of the 20th century, this space was the first headquarters for the American Indian movement under the leadership of Russell Means. And every year in April, St. John's hosts our Station Hope event, a free event where over 200 artists gather to reflect and celebrate justice, equity, and hope. Thank you, Lake Erie Native American Council dancers and drummers for being here tonight. Thank you, Tommy Orange, for being here. Thank you, Cleveland Foundation, for help producing this event. And to you all, thank you for being here, and welcome to St. John's.
I'm going to stand up here just so everyone can see me really well. Got heels on, but I'm not quite that tall. Ani, Dindisikwe Indigenakas, Aji Jakandodam, Waganakasin Odawa and Donjaba. My name is Cynthia Connolly. My Anishinaabe name is Blue Jay Woman. I am from the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians, and I'm of the Crane Clan. That's in northern Michigan. On behalf of the Lake Erie Native American Council, or LENAC, we are thrilled to partner with the Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards and welcome award-winning author Tommy Orange into our community this evening. Miigwech, thank you for joining us here at this historical St. John's Episcopal Church, and miigwech as well to St. John's for their hosting. LENAC is a 501c3 nonprofit and was established in the early 1990s to promote traditional culture and increase awareness of Native American people in Northeast Ohio. We hope you all had a chance to enjoy what we call Indian tacos. If you did not have a chance to grab some fry bread, the refreshments should be available after the program. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with fry bread, first of all, it's delicious. Second, like many dishes from oppressed communities of color, it originates from struggle and survival. Natives on reservations were forced to make do with cheap, low-quality government commodity foods. So like as the saying goes, when life gives you flour, lard, water, and salt, you make fry bread. Today, each family has their own protected recipe. It took me nearly 30 years to snag the recipe from my Aunt Bev. You're likely to find fry bread at every powwow, community gathering, or feast involving Native people. Today's fry bread was prepared by our LENAC chairwoman, Marlis Rambo, and Deja Sayer, the daughter of our late chairwoman, Kathy Sayer, who walked on to the Creator last year. I've been invited to speak to you this evening as a member of the Cleveland Native American community, as a huge fan of Tommy Orange's debut novel, There, and as a supporter of Cleveland Book Week, made possible by Edith Anisfield-Wolf and the Cleveland Foundation. Miigwech. Today we have our LENAC dancers joining us here in celebration. If you ever go to a powwow, you will see various dance styles. Some have roots in certain sections of Indian country, like the jingle dress, which comes from the Ojibwe people. Others are more modern forms of dance, like the fancy shawl and men's fancy, which are quicker paced, have faster footwork, and are meant to be very flashy and competitive. Our drum today is Thunder Nation, which is also from Northeast Ohio. They will be playing two songs. The first song that you will hear is a sort of welcome song, an intertribal. It's what you will hear when you go to powwow during grand entry. So all of our dancers will be entering here shortly in that style. The second song we will play is an honor song in honor of Tommy Orange in celebration of his achievement for this week. For the second song, I want to remind you that no photography or video is allowed, and to please stand in honor of Tommy. Once again, miigwech, thank you very much for joining us today, and congratulations to Tommy Orange on your much-deserved award. let our dancers catch their breath really quick. I wanted to take a moment to introduce all of our dancers very fast. We have our traditional dancers. First, we have Tori Necklace. She is Cheyenne River Sioux and Whitefish River First Nations. We have Molly Rambo, who's also Cheyenne River Sioux. Isabella Rivera, who's from the 5 Civilized Tribes of Oklahoma. Robert Rice, Saponi Catawba, and Tuscarora. Our jingle dress dancers are Alyssa Rambo, Cheyenne River Sioux, and Cayuga. We have Sybil Necklace. She's Cheyenne River Lakota and Whitefish River First Nations. That's you. For our fancy shawl dancers, we have Savannah and Shaughnessy Rowe for their Tioga Pueblo in Omaha. Then we have Vivian and Cora Connolly, their Little Traverse Bay Odawa and Six Nations Onondaga. Our chicken dancer is Joseph Handboy, Cheyenne River Sioux and Whitefish River First Nations. And of course, our men's fancy dancer, Logan Hannigan, Cheyenne River Sioux and Cayuga. All of our dancers here today are part of our LENAC culture classes, which is funded in part from Neighborhood Connections and Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. We brought these dance classes to our community about 3 years ago because there was a really big need for our kids, our youth, to make sure they're connected with their culture. Just like the character Orville Redfeather from Tommy Orange's book, a lot of our youth were learning dance moves from YouTube and from other non-traditional ways. And so we thought that we would make it more formal and have our youth come in and learn their dances, and as well as the adults, how to make the regalia. So thanks to Cuyahoga Arts and Culture and Neighborhood Connections for allowing that to happen. Our dancers and drummers, feel free to take a seat if you want, or go get some refreshments, cool off, catch your breath. Thank you so much, miigwech. All right, another round of applause for our dancers. Thank you. Miigwech, miigwech. Of course, it's my kids that are lingering. Go take a seat. All right. Okay. So I want everyone to pause just for a moment and take in your surroundings of this historical church. Many in Cleveland know its significance as the last stop on the Underground Railroad. Perhaps you've attended Station Hope here in the spring. But this church also has significance to the Cleveland Native community and was chosen intentionally as the host for this event because of that. In Tommy Orange's book, which takes place in Oakland, California, we learn in the prologue about the Relocation Act, a program enacted by the federal government from the mid-1950s to the 1970s. This program was guised as a jobs program, but actually aimed to assimilate Native Americans into mainstream culture and thereby lessening their federal trust responsibility and treaty obligations to Native nations. There were about 9 target cities for the urban relocation program. Oakland was one, Chicago was another, and Cleveland was also one. Selected specifically because Ohio does not have any federally recognized tribes and due to its distance from tribal reservations. This made it difficult for participants to return home if they wanted to. But many of us did not assimilate. There are 573 federally recognized tribes today, and all are different from each other. Yet during relocation, our people came together, formed Indian centers, bowling leagues, and hosted social hours. The near west side of Cleveland, right here, was filled with Native families. It was our own Indian town. The Happy Dog down the street used to be our old hangout spot. What is now Brew Nuts on 65th in Detroit was another place you'd be guaranteed to run into your Native brothers and sisters. And then we have the walls of this church, where Native leaders and activists like Russell Means launched the Indian rights movement. We are now in the 4th generation since the relocation program, and more than 70% of Native Americans live off the reservation. We are your neighbors, your coworkers, your doctors, nurses, soldiers, and rocket scientists at NASA Glenn. Yet the bulk of literature that covers Native people focuses on either reservation life or has us situated in the historical past, feathered and leathered. A 2018 study called Reclaiming Native Truth involved 28 focus groups in 11 states, surveyed over 13,000 people, and analyzed thousands of social media posts and found some pretty shocking results. I'm going to give you 2 facts. 2/3 of respondents said they don't know or have never met a Native American person. That's nearly 66% of this country. Only 13% of education curriculum talks about Native Americans after the year 1900. Just 13%. Crystal Echohawk, co-project leader of Reclaiming Native Truth, talked about the repercussions and seriousness of these findings. She said, and I quote, "The complete lack of representation in the media, in pop culture, in K-12 education not only erases us from the American consciousness, it inadvertently creates a bias. People were less likely to support certain rights and social justice issues for Native people when they had zero perception and understanding of who we are. Invisibility and erasure is the modern form of racism against Native people." And this is why Tommy Orange's book is so groundbreaking and essential. It is not an ordinary book for our community. His book breathes new life into Native literature, focusing on urban Indians and the complexity of modern Indian identity and authenticity. While his work is fiction, I know for a fact that I'm not the only urban Indian that felt like his characters were reflective of our real life, of our lived experiences in places like here in Cleveland, Ohio. I heard in an interview on The Sound of Ideas that he originally wrote this book to resonate with Native American readers. Well, it did. And then it resonated with millions of other non-natives, reaching number 8 on the New York Times bestseller list. This is the representation we need. Moving away from invisible and into the minds of the American consciousness as a modern 21st century people. And for these reasons, and so many more, I have the honor of introducing the author of There, There, the winner of the Anisfield-Wolf Book Award for Fiction, Tommy Orange.
Sorry, I felt too weird being up there, so. Feels like a hard act to follow, and now to read a book after all of that life. Thank you to all the dancers and families for that, and for that introduction. I am going to read from a book now. The book has a lot of different voices, so I'm going to jump around and read those voices. But I don't want to read too much because that gets boring, no matter if the writing is good. And if I feel like it's boring while I'm doing it, maybe I'll stop in the middle and we can do like a couple questions to wake people up. So I'm going to keep an eye on the time. That's why I'm going to be looking at my phone. I'm going to read from Thomas Frank. This is my first and middle name is Thomas Frank. This was sort of purposefully autobiographical, this chapter. It's not entirely, but a lot of the characters share things with me and the community that I've been a part of my whole life. Thomas Frank. Before you were born, you were a head and a tail in a milky pool, a swimmer. You were a race, a dying off, a breaking through, and a rival. Before you were born, you were an egg in your mom who was an egg in her mom. Before you were born, You were the nested Russian grandmother doll of possibility in your mom's ovaries. You were two halves of 1,000 different kinds of possibilities. A million heads or tails, flip shine on a spun coin. Before you were born, you were the idea to make it to California for gold or bust. You were white, you were brown, you were red, you were dust. You were hiding, you were seeking. Before you were born, you were chased, beaten, broken, trapped on a reservation in Oklahoma. Before you were born, you were an idea your mom got into her head in the 70s to hitchhike across the country and become a dancer in New York. You were on your way when she did not make it across the country but sputtered and spiraled and wound up in Taos, New Mexico at a peyote commune named Morning Star. Before you were born, you were your dad's decision to move away from the reservation up to northern New Mexico to learn about a Pueblo guy's fireplace. You were the light in the wet of your parents' eyes as they met across that fireplace in ceremony. Before you were born, your halves inside them moved to Oakland. Before you were born, before your body was much more than heart, spine, bone, brain, skin, blood, and vein, when you just started to build muscle with movement, before you showed, bulged in her belly, as her belly, before your dad's pride could belly swell from the sight of you, your parents were in a room listening to the sound your heart made. You had an arrhythmic heartbeat. The doctor said it was normal. Your arrhythmic heart was not abnormal. Maybe he's a drummer, your dad said. He doesn't even know what a drum is, your mom said. Heart, your dad said. The man said arrhythmic. That means no rhythm. Maybe it just means he knows the rhythm so good he doesn't always hit it when you expect him to. Rhythm of what? She said. But once you got big enough to make your mom feel you, she couldn't deny it. You swam to the beat. When your dad brought out the kettle drum, you'd kick her in time with it, or to her heartbeat, or to one of the oldies mixtapes she had made from records she loved and played to no end in your Aerostar minivan. Once you were out in the world, running and jumping and climbing, you tapped your toes and fingers everywhere, all the time, on tabletops, desktops. You tapped every surface you found in front of you, listened for the sound things made back at you when you hit them. The timbre of taps, the din of dings, silverware clangs in kitchens, door knocks, knuckle cracks, head scratches. You were finding out that everything makes a sound. Everything can be drumming, whether rhythm is kept or strays. Even gunshots and backfire, the howl of trains at night, the wind against your windows. The world is made of sound. But inside every kind of sound lurked a sadness. In the quiet between your parents, after a fight they both managed to lose, you and your sisters listening through the walls for tones, listening for early signs of a fight, for late signs of a fight reignited. The sound of the worship service, that building drone and wail of evangelical Christian worship, your mom speaking in tongues on the crest of that weekly Sunday wave, sadness because you couldn't feel any of it in there and wanted to, felt you needed it, that it could protect you from the dreams you had almost every night about the end of the world and the possibility of hell forever. You living there still a boy, unable to die or leave or do anything but burn in a lake of fire. Sadness came when you had to wake up your snoring dad in church, even as members of the congregation, members of your family were being slain by the Holy Ghost in the aisles right next to him. Sadness came when the days got shorter at the end of summer, when the street got quiet without kids out anymore. In the color of that fleeting sky, sadness lurked, sadness pounced, slid in between everything, anything it could find its way into, through sound, through you. You didn't think of any of the tapping or knocking as drumming until you actually started drumming many years later. It would have been good to know that you'd always done something naturally. But there was too much going on with everyone else in your family for anyone to notice. You should probably have done something else with your fingers and toes than tap, with your mind and time than knock at all the surfaces in your life like you were looking for a way in. This is from I'm going to start from the beginning of this chapter, but this is a chapter about a little girl on the island of Alcatraz during the Indian occupation. Opal Viola Victoria Bearshield. Me and my sister Jackie were doing our homework in the living room with the TV on when our mom came home with the news that we'd be moving to Alcatraz. "Pack your things. We're going over there. Today," our mom said. And we knew what she meant. We'd been over there to celebrate not celebrating Thanksgiving. Back then, we lived in East Oakland in a yellow house. It was the brightest but smallest house on the block, a 2-bedroom with a tiny kitchen that couldn't even fit a table. I didn't love it there. The carpets were too thin and smelled like dirt and smoke. We didn't have a couch or TV at first, but it was definitely better than where we were before. One morning, our mom woke us up in a hurry. Her face was beat up. She had a brown leather jacket way too big for her draped over her shoulders. Both her top and bottom lips were swollen. Seeing those big lips messed me up. She couldn't talk right. She told us to pack our things then, too. Jackie's last name is Redfeather and mine is Bearshield. Both our dads had left our mom. That morning, our mom came home beat up. We took the bus to a new house, the yellow house. I don't know how she got us a house. On the bus, I moved closer to my mom and put a hand into her jacket pocket. "Why do we got names like we do?" I said. "They come from old Indian names. We had our own way of naming before white people came over and spread all those dad names around in order to keep the power with the dads." I didn't understand this explanation about dads, and I didn't know if bear shield meant shields that bears use to protect themselves, or shields people use to protect themselves against bears. Or were the shields themselves made out of bears? Either way, it was all pretty hard to explain in school how I was a bear shield, and that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was my first name, which was 2, Opal Viola. That makes me Opal Viola Victoria Bearshield. Victoria was our mom's name, even though she went by Vicky, and Opal Viola came from our grandma, who we never met. Our mom told us she was a medicine woman and renowned singer of spiritual songs, so I was supposed to carry that big old name around with honor. The good thing was, the kids didn't have to do anything to my name to make fun of me, no rhymes or variations. They just said the whole thing and it was funny. We got on a bus on a cold gray morning in late January 1970. Me and Jackie had matching beat up old red duffel bags that didn't hold much, but we didn't have much. I packed 2 outfits and tucked my teddy bear 2 Shoes under my arm. The name 2 Shoes came from my sister because her childhood teddy bear only had 1 shoe the way they got it. Her bear wasn't named 1 Shoe, but maybe I should have considered myself lucky to have a bear with 2 shoes and not just 1. But then, bears don't wear shoes, so maybe I wasn't lucky either, but something else. A speedboat took us over to the island. I kept my head in my mom's lap the whole time. The guys who brought us over there were dressed in military uniforms. I didn't know what we were getting into. Jackie got on a lot better than me. She fell in with a group of teenagers that ran all over the island. The adults were so busy there was no way for them to keep track. I hung by my mom's side. We went around talking to people, attending official meetings where everyone tried to agree on what to do, what to ask for, what our demands would be. The more important seeming Indians tended to get mad more easily. These were the men. And the women weren't listened to as much as our mom would have liked. Those first days went by like weeks. I felt like we were going to stay out there for good, get the feds to build us a school and medical facility, a cultural center. At some point, though, my mom told me to go out and see what Jackie was up to. I didn't want to go out there alone, but eventually I got bored enough and went out to see what I could find. I took 2 Shoes with me. I know I'm too old to have him. I'm almost 12. But I took him anyway. I went down to the other side of the lighthouse where it seemed like you weren't supposed to go. I found them by the shore closest to the Golden Gate. They were all over the rocks, pointing at each other and laughing in that wild, cruel way teenagers have about them. I told 2 Shoes it probably wasn't such a good idea and that we should just go back. "Sister, you don't have to worry. All these people, Even these young ones over here, they're all our relatives, so don't be scared. Plus, if anyone comes after you, I'll jump down and bite their ankles. They would never expect that. I'll use my sacred bear medicine on them. It'll put them to sleep. It'll be like instantaneous hibernation. That's what I'll do, sister, so don't worry. Creator made me strong to protect you, Two Shoes said. I told Two Shoes to stop talking like an Indian. I don't know what you mean by talking like an Indian, he said. You're not an Indian, T.S. You're a teddy bear. You know, we're not so different. Both of us got our names from pig brain men. Pig brain? Men with pigs for brains. Oh, meaning Columbus called you Indians. For us, it was Teddy Roosevelt's fault. How? He was hunting bear one time, but then found this real scraggly old hungry bear, and he refused to shoot it. Then in the newspapers, there was a comic about that hunting story that made it seem like Mr. Roosevelt was merciful, a real nature lover, that kind of thing. Then they made the little stuffed bear and named it Teddy's Bear. Teddy's Bear became Teddy Bear. What they didn't say was that he slit that old bear's throat. It's that kind of mercy they don't want you to know about. And how do you know about any of this? You got to know about the history of your people, how you got to be here. That's all based on what people done to get you here. Us bears, you Indians, we've been through a lot. They tried to kill us, but then when you hear them tell it, they make history seem like one big heroic adventure across an empty forest. There were bears and Indians all over the place. Sister, they slit all our throats. Why do I feel like Mom told us all this already, I said. Roosevelt said, I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are dead Indians, but I believe 9 out of every 10 are, and I shouldn't like to inquire too closely into the case of the 10th. Damn, T.S., that's messed up. I only heard the one about the big stick. That big stick is the lie about mercy. Speak softly and carry a big stick. That's what he said about foreign policy. That's what they used on us, bears and Indians both, foreigners on our own land. And with their big sticks, they marched us so far west we almost disappeared. Then Two Shoes went quiet. That's the way it was with him. He either had something to say or he didn't. I could tell by what kind of shine I saw on the black of his eyes which one it was. I put Two Shoes behind some rocks and headed down to my sister. How's everyone doing? I'm going to read a little bit from the interlude, which a lot of people have called the prologue and the interlude in my book essays that I inserted into fiction, and that is false. I meant them to be part of a fictional work. Of course, they have a voice of an essay. I get it. I'm not like totally against it, but I probably wouldn't have written them if I thought I was writing an essay. So, also the whole thing was like 15 pages and was just at the beginning and was a prologue, and my editor told me I couldn't do that, and so I cut it in half and put the second half in the middle and said it was an interlude. So I'm just going to read a little bit from that. Blood. Blood is messy when it comes out. Inside, it runs clean and looks blue in tubes that line our bodies, that split and branch like Earth's river systems. Blood is 90% water, and like water, it must move. Blood must flow, never stray or split or clot or divide, lose any essential amount of itself while it distributes evenly through our bodies. But blood is messy when it comes out. It dries, divides, and cracks in the air. Native blood quantum was introduced in 1705 at the Virginia colony. If you were at least half native, you didn't have the same rights as white people. Blood quantum and tribal membership qualifications have since been turned over to individual tribes to decide. In the late 1990, Saddam Hussein commissioned a Quran to be written in his own blood. Now Muslim leaders aren't sure what to do with it. To have written the Quran in blood was a sin, but to destroy it would also be a sin. The wound that was made when white people came and took all that they took has never healed. An unattended wound gets infected, becomes a new kind of wound, like the history of what actually happened became a new kind of history. All these stories that we haven't been telling all this time, that we haven't been listening to, are just part of what we need to heal. Not that we're broken, and don't make the mistake of calling us resilient. To not have been destroyed, to not have given up, to have survived is no badge of honor. Or would you call an attempted murder victim resilient? When we go to tell our stories, people think we want it to have gone different. People want to say things like sore losers and move on already. Quit playing the blame game. But is it a game? Only those who have lost as much as we have see the particularly nasty slice of smile on someone who thinks they're winning when they say get over it. This is the thing. If you have the option to not think about or even consider history, whether you learned it right or not, or whether it even deserves your consideration, that's how you know you're on board the ship that serves hors d'oeuvres and fluffs your pillows, while others are out at sea swimming or drowning, or clinging to little inflatable rafts that they have to take turns keeping inflated, people short of breath, who've never even heard of the words hors d'oeuvres or fluff. And someone from up on the yacht says, it's too bad those people down there are lazy, not as smart and able as we are up here, we who have built these strong, large, stylish boats ourselves, we who float the seven seas like kings. And then someone else on board says something like, but your father gave you this yacht, and these are his servants who brought the hors d'oeuvres. At which point that person gets tossed overboard by a group of hired thugs who'd been hired by the father who owned the yacht, hired for the express purpose of removing any and all agitators on the yacht to keep them from making unnecessary waves or even referencing the father or the yacht itself. Meanwhile, the man thrown overboard begs for his life, and the people on the small inflatable rafts can't get to him soon enough, or they don't even try, and the yacht's speed and weight cause an undertow. Then in whispers, while the agitator gets sucked under the yacht, private agreements are made, precautions are measured out, and everyone quietly agrees to keep on quietly agreeing to the implied rule of law and to not think about what just happened. Soon the father who put these things in place is only spoken of in the form of lore, stories told to children at night under the stars, at which point there are suddenly several fathers, noble, wise forefathers, and the boat sails on unfettered. If you were fortunate enough to be born into a family whose ancestors directly benefited from genocide and or slavery, maybe you think the more you don't know, the more innocent you can stay, which is a good incentive to not find out, to not look too deep, to walk carefully around the sleeping tiger. Look no further than your last name. Follow it back, and you might find your line paved with gold or beset with traps. Okay, I think I'll just read one more thing. I'm going to read something new that's not published yet. It's not that long. Is that all right? Is everybody doing okay? Hoops. My dad ruined his knees laying concrete in our backyard for a basketball court. He brought bags and bags of it on a wheelbarrow, and I don't think I helped enough. He got down on his knees to even everything. In college, he was good enough to play just too Indian for the times, for the coach and the all-white team in Oklahoma. I ruined one of my knees coming down from a rebound 20 years after he put down the court for me. The years between our knee ruinations, we spent losing track of each other and finding each other again, only to find out we'd maybe been gone too long to get back what we'd once had. We're still trying to get back to something we once had, which maybe currently is ungettable as robot knee replacements. My dad's actually moved past considering robot knee replacements. He's looking at getting the stem cells of pig fetuses injected into his knees to stimulate cartilage growth or something. I don't speak my dad's first language, Cheyenne, or pray like him. And I don't know if that's what I would want, were I to begin to want like him, were I to learn to walk again with a different tongue, were I to get down on my knees and ask for help. As it is, I run too much. I understand this to mean my knees will eventually be as ruined as his. Is this premeditated ruination? It's all I know how to do. Before my dad knew his knees were ruined, after all the concrete had dried, and we could finally bounce the ball the way it was meant to be bounced, against anything hard and flat enough to have it come back to your hand in such a way that allows for even rhythmic reciprocation. We shot hoops together off the glass, mostly wordlessly, and the light of day withered, or I felt something wither in me because of the going light. Banking off the glass was weak. That's what some of my friends thought. And I didn't know I didn't agree with them then. My dad, an engineer, banked off the sharp of the upper right corner of the backboard square with mathematical precision, then did a slow jog to the ball that was a small kind of celebration for having made the shot. That the good feeling of making a shot, whether it's off the glass or not, never goes away is the only kind of grace I know to expect. It took me 4 days to put up my son's basketball hoop, and I leaned heavily on the help of my niece, Bella, who thinks better than me. I can't jump anymore, or I can only jump if I'll never come back down. My son doesn't care about whether the ball goes in off the glass or straight through clean as Dawn. And not the Dawn soap that cleans, but the way the newest part of the day is clean because it hasn't been touched yet by what will happen all over the world every single day. Death and laughter, more ruined knees and strained father-son relationships. Miracles, too, unforgivable corruption of power, and unreasonably large hearts thanklessly doing work for people who need help. Once the night fully came that night, after the concrete was laid down, my dad went inside and I kept shooting free throws to tell him I was grateful. Back then I was afraid of the dark. I maybe still am in a different way, but I kept shooting and could barely see the hoop. Before I stopped, I couldn't tell if I was making it or not except by the sound of the net. It's probably not true, but I was thinking he could hear me keep shooting in the back, bouncing, dribbling. Missing it or making it can mean the same thing if you're just telling your dad you're still there, loving what he'd done for you. When I was shooting hoops with my son recently, he told me shooting hoops is not a cool way to talk about playing basketball. I asked him what was better, and he said he didn't know but to stop saying shooting hoops. I never wondered about how shooting for throwing a basketball was so violent and inaccurate. Also how hoops feel native and how native people love basketball for some reason. And then also how guns and shooting and natives and cowboys and Indians, how much is embedded in language. I told my son we could call it balling, and he hated that. I did too once I said it, and even more so when it was clear he hated it. He told me parents are cooler when they're not trying to be cool. I didn't know how he knew this, but I knew it to be true. I wondered what cool parents he was hanging out with who were not trying to act cool and achieving it. I told him I wasn't trying to be cool, but I wasn't so sure. We played a game of horse, but called it armadillo to play longer. The sun was going away again. I was trying to make it seem like I wasn't letting him win. I was an armad, which he kept telling me meant I was mad, as in you are mad because you're losing. I pretended to be mad and wondered in that moment if my dad had pretended to not have ruined his knees while we shot around that night after all the concrete dried and the sun dyed its daily. My son was an arm, and I told him it was the best of the limbs, and he disagreed and said legs were better. If I could still jump, I'd probably agree with him. If I could still make sense of what it means to be a father and have a father, and how throwing balls through hoops means both nothing and everything, how it's up in the air, the meaning, and like a ball headed for the corner of a backboard square, a maybe not cool way to make it. But to make it is all that matters, to keep living as long as we can, not let death come before it comes in the many ways it can come to take us before our time. This, we know, is as much as we can do. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tara Jefferson with the Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards, and I just want to say this was such a wonderful reading tonight. Can you all give Tommy Orange one more round of applause?
Thank you.
So we are going to move into the Q&A portion of the evening. We have two handheld mics. I'm going to give you this one, Nicole, in a second. But if you have a question, we have two handheld mics that are going around up and down the aisles. It's a little dim in here, so if you have a question, please raise your hand high, and I will let Tommy take it away.
Oh, hi, this is thrilling. Thank you for being here. I have a question about the phrase that you use about Dean and his story collecting, letting the content drive the vision. And can you kind of talk about that, and does that have to do with your own writing process? Thank you.
I think I was a little bit making fun of Dean not having vision, but I think it was my process. So, when I first thought of the idea for the book, the premise was just having contemporary Native lives converge at a powwow at the Oakland Coliseum, and so I guess I was just allowing voices to come and seeing if they felt real and true enough to stay, and so I guess I was making it up as I went along.
Hi, Tommy. Thanks for coming and reading. It was fantastic. I just wonder how many Native communities you're encountering, and what it's like if you're touring across the country and you're stopping, what you're experiencing in other cities with other Native communities and how you're being received.
It was really important to me that Native communities, first the Oakland one, because that's the one I was writing about, but in general that people wouldn't think that what I wrote was untrue to their experience. I mean, of course, I can't write to everybody's experience. There's so many different Native experiences, but there are commonalities, and I've been sort of embraced by all the Native communities I've come across. More markedly, the reaction from Native people is there's so much joy in feeling like they're in a book in a way that feels now, and like it hasn't been represented enough. There's joy is the reaction, and I've had a lot of white reactions that they still like the book, but their response is like, but it's so sad, and that it's just interesting to get sadness is people are willing to tell me directly that basically my life is sad because I'm writing about through my experience, and it's just dismissive because the book is sad. I write about sadness directly, but to dismiss it as sadness being that's all you have to say about it is kind of hurtful. And to have the native reaction be one that's like of exuberance was really refreshing, and it was great to have that happen.
Welcome to Cleveland, and I hope that we're treating you well here. My question is, was there always the title, or was there a different working title you had as you figured it out as you went along?
It was always based on the Gertrude Stein quote, and I refuse to tell you the clumsy iterations of what it was on the way. But once I landed on there, it just felt right, and I immediately Googled it to make sure nobody else had the book name. And that's when I found the Radiohead song, which I love Radiohead, and I actually already knew the song, but I didn't know the name of the song because I pirated Hail to the Thief, and it was just called Track 09. And so, but then when I looked up the lyrics, because who can understand what Tom York is saying, the lyrics, they matched the themes of the book so well that I sort of worked that into one of the chapters because there was such deep resonance there.
This is not trying to criticize you in any way, but is the profane language in the book something that you intended to put in from the beginning?
Wait, is it something that I what?
That you intended.
It just felt like profane language is part of my life and people that I hear and the way people talk. So I feel like to not have it be in there, I would have been avoiding something that felt true. It's not, I mean, I don't know that it's like throughout everywhere, but there's definitely profane language in it, and that just felt like a reflection of what I was writing about. So I think I would have been going out of my way to not have it be in there, and I don't know what the reason for doing that would be. Does that make sense? I didn't use any tonight? Yeah, well, I don't actually curse that much.
Tommy, we celebrate your tremendous accomplishment, and I personally am very, very proud of being here and in this opportunity. My question is centered around the issue of being a minority. Through my prism and looking at you, you would look like a white man. Do you think that that has anything to do with your ability to move forward? Now, we do recognize there are what are called white minorities. My heritage is black and part Jewish. However, if you were to look at me, you would look at me as a black man. Would that have any impact upon your success or what you think in any capacity at all?
Well, I think the perception of Native people, including me, as looking white is more related to our issues of invisibility and not knowing what we look like because you don't know enough Native people. And the range of what we look like is, it spans a lot of different looks. The way we've been depicted in popular culture is like, this is what the Indian's supposed to look like. And so, I mean, I am half white, so it's not totally untrue, but I think a lot of times when that comes up for me, it's more of a reflection of somebody who doesn't know what Native people look like than that I don't look Indian enough. The success part, I don't know.
Hi. Friends and I were talking about the book, and it struck us how cinematic it is in some ways. And I wondered if there were any kind of cinematic influences in terms of how you structured the book, the ending of the book, or anything like that.
I don't know that I was thinking in terms of being cinematic while I was writing it. I certainly love movies, but everyone does. I think when I've read other works that have a cinematic style, I've definitely liked it. So that probably influenced the way I tried to write it. But I can't say that I was going for that necessarily.
I can identify with the 12-year-old and his teddy bear because I'm 63 and I still collect teddy bears.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for this book. So I was curious about the reception in Oakland among Black people, because Oakland is such a river that brings together different oppressed people and struggle, from Fruitvale and Oscar Grant to the Black Panther Party to the lives and struggle of Native Americans. So what has been the reception more broadly in Oakland?
Similar to what I was saying earlier about the Native reception, the Oakland reception has been really wonderful. And people from Oakland say things like, they've enjoyed it that much more because of depicting Oakland in a way that feels true to them and their experience. So that was cool to hear because I very much wanted to write about the place that I grew up, and I love Oakland, and there's 10 million New York novels, and there's very few Oakland-specific novels, so I very much wanted to contribute in that way.
Hi, Tommy. Your writing is mesmerizing, and I haven't even finished the book. I just started it, and it takes my breath away. So my question, thank you. My question to you is, when did you know you were a writer, and how do you stoke the fires of that gift for yourself?
I came to writing pretty late. I was an athlete when I was a kid, and had a lot going on in the family, and didn't necessarily have any encouragement. There wasn't a single conversation about college, and I got kicked out of high school and got into drugs, and then became a musician, and went to school for sound engineering, which was not academic, or it wasn't like a college experience. And I still wasn't writing at that point. And I started writing after I graduated from college. I had a job at a used bookstore, and I fell in love with fiction there, and pretty soon decided I wanted to do it, and felt so far behind that I think I devoted myself in kind of a crazy way. But like for 10 years, just in private, just working away whenever I could on writing and reading. Sort of bringing what I learned from being an athlete and musician, that it's a discipline, that writing is a discipline just like other art forms and other things, that when you put in the hours, you can see things happen. In terms of stoking the fire, it feels more like preventing myself from being too self-destructive, and like creating a space where I don't hate what I'm writing, and trying to find the moments where I'm in a good space to edit my work without being super destructive. So it feels like a delicate balance to not destroy myself is more what it feels like than stoking any fire. No?
To go back to that bookstore, who were the people you were reading, and what do you read now?
I was reading a lot of philosophy and religion, just sort of lost in my 20s, like you do, and I found Kafka and Borges were kind of like a bridge from that to fiction. And the first novels that I loved were Confederacy of Dunces and Sylvia Plath's Bell Jar, and then I got really into international literature, and eventually read all the Native authors, and that was a big deal. But I think I came to them late because reading reservation-based literature, I think I felt isolated in my experience growing up in the city, and so I got to the Native canon pretty late. it was a lot of international works and translation that influenced me to write.
I was wondering, so you open up with the prologue, talking a lot about the historical violence that Native people faced, and you wrote a book that's, it's very modern and centered around an act of violence. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the decision to do that.
So, because the urban Native experience has not been depicted very often, I knew I wanted to kind of contextualize all the characters before the stories started. And it kind of took me on a journey back into history, and this image of Indian heads kept coming up, and that's one of the themes of the prologue. In terms of the violence, but one of the stories one of the repeated stories my dad told me growing up was the Sand Creek Massacre, and that is also in the prologue. And for the longest time, I thought it was sort of morbid, or I didn't know why, maybe because never forget, in the spirit of never forget what happened, why I heard that massacre story. And I only realized in the past couple of years that it was my dad's naming story. And so he got his name. There was a baby that was saved by a young man, and they traded names because that was a thing that you did if you saved someone's life in Cheyenne tradition. And that was where my dad's Indian name came from. So that's more of the story he was telling. Violence, it felt to me, just digging into history and trying to thread together a narrative that led to urban Native experience, felt pretty unavoidable. Yeah, I think I answered what you asked.
Thank you for addressing that people say to you, you don't look Native. So obviously you can see that even though I'm a Cherokee, people say to me, oh, you don't look like a Cherokee. And so I work with veterans, and one of my Native veterans taught me to say, oh, so you buy into that stereotype that all Jews have big nose, all Polish people are stupid, and all black people, have huge lips, like really, and it kind of comes out very nasty. What do you say when you're confronted with that? Because I get that a lot.
I mean, I think I said it earlier. It depends on who's asking and the manner in which they ask me, if it's disrespectful or sincere, and I just try to speak from my heart. I don't have any one-liners for you.
So I wanted to ask you about, you touched on it in a couple, sorry. I wonder if you could just touch a little bit on, I guess like kind of the interactions between Native communities and Christianity. There's a really hard history in Ohio having to do with like a Native community that had converted all to Christianity, and a militia had come over from a state over and had murdered the entire community. And I just wondered if you could, talk a little bit about how you kind of, maybe your history with that and how you kind of touch on that in the book.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think part of not becoming interested in school was related to not thinking I would make it to adulthood. And this is because I was raised in Christian evangelical church, and I was deeply afraid of the end of the world and then hell forever because I didn't believe in Jesus in my heart. And I tried. It wasn't for not trying that I didn't. I just couldn't. And I would nightmare about the end of the world almost every night. This was my childhood, very bright and cheery. But it was related to not thinking about my future, because I honestly, I spent majority of my childhood not thinking it would happen. They preach about the end of the world, and my mom's speaking in tongues, and everything was crazy. And at the peak of this, and my dad's a roadman in Native American church, so he's running Native ceremonies on weekends, and my mom's having prayer groups who call what my dad's doing demonic. And I grew up with my parents fighting, and this felt representative of this clash. And the peak of this moment was I was like 10 or 11, and my sister got really into PCP, which I'll never understand why anybody could get really into it, but she totally did. And at one point she did too much, and she came home with like a demon voice, having smoked too much PCP, and she was like telling my dad in this voice, like calling him out for weird religious stuff, and she like went to the floor and foamed at the mouth, and my mom called her emergency prayer circle over, and they gave her milk for some reason. And so it was a very real and visceral part of my reality growing up, and there's a very real, both horrible history and also an adaptive one where Native people learn to make Christianity their own. My dad grew up with his grandparents who raised him going to church on Sundays, doing Native American church ceremony, eating peyote, staying up all night on Saturday nights, and going to sweats, and sort of just embraced all of it. I don't think there's any, I can't condemn anybody's beliefs. There's a very messed up history, but the way that people have adapted it and made it their own is their, it's a beautiful thing to do if you can do it. I'm not a Christian myself. I feel deeply, I don't know, maybe resentful about not having a childhood because of it. And my mom has since left Christianity, and she's back into Native spirituality. And but both of my parents they pray to Jesus, and it means something else for them. They're not necessarily Christians. It's all very confusing.
We good? All right. Thank you so much, Chimigwech, for everyone who came out today. If we can give another round of applause for Tommy. Truly, what a great honor to have Tommy come visit us in Cleveland, and for the Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards for giving him this award. Thank you very much for that. If we can have our drummers back out here, we probably need to clear a little space for our dancers. So the final song we're going to do is something that we do traditionally to kind of close out gatherings or the evening. We know that Tommy has traveled a very long way to get here to Cleveland. Multiple time zones were crossed. So to send him back, we do something called a travel song, just kind of a good way to send people off and make sure that they get where they're going safely. So we're going to do a quick little travel song for Tommy. You don't need to stand. You can take pictures to this as well. Thank you.
Can we give it one more round of applause for all the... Now, this gathering marks the end, our final author event for Cleveland Book Week. We wouldn't be able to do the work that we do and have these such wonderful events without our wonderful partners, LENAC and St. John's Episcopal Church. We hope you all enjoyed tonight's event and make sure to go home and tell all of your friends to get ready for Cleveland Book Week 2020. Now we're going to move into our book signing portion of the evening. We're going to ask that you exit through these doors that you came in earlier and go back around to the parish hall where we had the refreshments. There are going to be copies of They're There for you to purchase. Also some more Indian tacos if you didn't get a chance to try that earlier. And we hope that you all enjoyed everything that you heard and saw tonight. And one more round of applause for Tommy Lynch.